So some of you may have been to the Momofuku Milk Bar in New York. A lot of you probably haven't, but they're really known for making really good sweets. And for example, they invented something called crack pie, which is supposed to be so good it's addictive like crack. It became the rage for a while in the early 2008 area, and then they got a whole bunch of political feedback and people didn't like them associating food with crack, and so now they've changed the name and now it's called the Milk Bar Pie. But it's the same thing. It's essentially a pecan pie without the pecans in it. Then they make certain cookies that are really good. One of the cookies they make is a marshmallow chocolate chip cornflake crunch. Now in Hawaii we make cornflake cookies and they're in shortbread. Here it's different. It's more like a chocolate chip cookie with a cornflake crunch in it. So I'm going to show you how to make it. We start by making the cornflake crunch. Generally, when you're dealing with cornflake crunch, you got to crunch it up with your hands first. I'm going to use a little cup. You want to crunch up the cornflakes just a bit. You want to take 9 tablespoons of butter. Melt them in the microwave. Into the crunched up cornflakes, you want to add a half a cup of malted milk powder, 3 tablespoons of sugar, a teaspoon of salt. Mix it all up. Now add in your melted butter. And just so you know, there is a lot of butter in this cookie. You got to be careful because if you use too much butter, the cookie's not going to stand up solid. It's going to become flat little discs. So you need to make sure not to overdo the butter. You're going to use 9 tablespoons of butter in this, which is going to become the cornflake crunch. And then you're going to add another half pound of butter into the cookie batter itself, that's the equivalent of about 16 tablespoons. So make sure not to overdo the butter or you're going to wind up without the solid cookie. Once you have this cornflake crunch all mixed up, you're going to bake it in the oven at 275 degrees for about 18 minutes. And then I'll come back to you when this is baked. Okay, it's been about 18 minutes and the cornflake crunch is now completely cooked. Now what you have here is 5 cups of cornflake crunch. You're only going to need 3 for this recipe. What you can do, now that it's cooked, is you can put it in a jar and it will store for about a week and a half in the jar, or you can stick it in the freezer and it'll store about 2 months to 6 months in the freezer. Use a fairly standard batter like you would use for chocolate chip cookies. And the first thing you do is you put in the butter, soften the butter, and like I said, that's an entire half pound of butter. You want to pour in about 1.5 cups of white sugar and 2/3 of a cup of brown sugar. And then you want to beat that together. You want to cream it. And the reason you cream the butter and sugar at the beginning of the recipe is that it beats air into the butter. It makes the cookies a little bit lighter. That's why when you see a lot of recipes, they say cream butter and sugar first. That's because that aerates the recipe. It makes the butter lighter. And then you mix the rest of the stuff in later. We're going to cream the butter and sugar. You see the butter is soft to start with. I'm going to start it out at a low speed so we get everything incorporated, and then I'm going to turn it up high so that we cream it together. Let me get the spatula so I can scrape everything down. Okay, so you can see that's all creamed together. It looks like a paste, and it's the butter and sugar whipped together with a little air in it. Now you want to add 1 egg. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract. and beat that in. Now that you've got your dough all mixed together, you want to add in 2/3 of a cup of chocolate chips. And I tend to like to use Guittard, but you can use just about any type you want. I think the better the chocolate chips, if you use a good quality chocolate, your cookie's going to taste a lot better. You also want to mix in about 1.5 cups of mini marshmallows. Brand doesn't matter. And then that cornflake crunch you made earlier, by now it's cool. You want to use 3 cups of that and mix that into your cookie as well. Now you can fold it in with your spatula, or to make it a little easier, you can use your mixer and put it on low, and that's going to mix everything in. Okay, now that it's all mixed in, you want to use an ice cream scoop or a cookie scoop. You want to get about 1/3 of a cup portion. You put it on the sheet, and then you lay them out all the way, and then you flatten them each out. After that, you put plastic wrap over it, you stick it in the refrigerator for 2 hours. Remember, I told you there's a lot of butter in this cookie, and if you don't chill it in the refrigerator for 2 hours before you bake it, it will just spread out and you'll have a big flat plate of nothingness. You need it to hold up its structure, and so you want to refrigerate it for 2 hours after you do it. Now I'm going to let Young do the scooping out and flattening of these things because she's more delicate than this with me, and if I do it, it's going to be a big mess anyway. So, Young, your turn. All right, these have been refrigerating for about 2 hours. So now I'm taking the plastic wrap off. I set the oven to 380 degrees. You want to cook it for about 10 minutes. And don't cook it too long because the cookies will just start to spread. You want to have them crispy, you want to have them ready, but you don't want to overcook them.